Ladies and gentlemen, this is the 12th and final round.
Right hand, Golovkin steps in and down he goes again. Unbelievable. Mayweather makes him pay. What a rookie mistake. A sensational left hook by De La Hoya.
It's facts. I'm the best. You know what I mean? Sometimes I don't want to believe it myself, but it's the truth. I'm the best.
I'm going to show you how great I am.
From Southern California, this is the Last Round Podcast.
Welcome to the Last Round, episode 283, and today's special guest is combat sports journalist Ryan O'Hara for Fights Around the World and 5-time Boxing Writers Award winner, and also bylines for Yahoo Sports. Thanks for joining me, Ryan.
Hey, thanks, Michael. How you doing?
I'm good. So as we were just talking about, we were just saying that you were actually in the new undisputed boxing game that's coming out shortly. Just kind of explain to us all how that came about.
I was working for the Ring magazine at the time, and Dougie Fisher, who's the editor-in-chief, he spoke for me. He spoke to Ash Habib, who is one of the, I think he's the head guy at Steel City Interactive, one of the main creators, and he talked to him about getting me in the game, and that's how it all happened, just building good relationships, and I was able to, I think Ash actually mentioned at the mixer that we had on Friday night before the Canelo Berlanga fight, I was actually one of the first, if not the first reporter that was actually signed on to the game back in October of 2020. So almost 4 years ago, I signed the contract to be in the game, and basically 4 years later, since the game's coming out on October 11th. So basically 4 years now, the game's coming out. So I'm really excited and looking forward to playing it more than I did on Friday. But, I had a fun time.
So I'm sure people are listening and thinking, how is a journalist in a boxing game? Because obviously I'm sure you're not a fighter that they can control.
Well, believe it or not, I'm actually going to be one of the fighters. That's actually planned. That's not going to be in the first release, because we had planned to scan me into the game Friday, and they had run into some issues, so they weren't able to scan me into the game on Friday. They will scan me in at a future date. So from my understanding, I'm going to be in career mode, on one of the reporters on social media, and then assuming that they're physically scanning me. So I'm probably going to have some sort of reporter role in that regard. And then a playable character, apparently. I posted a selfie a few days ago saying, hey, that'd be a good idea if I can be a reporter in one sense and then beat your you-know-what in the other. And Ash actually commented and said, that's a great idea. So it sounds like they're on board.
So for all the fighters that you've written reviews and reports that they've never liked, they can jump on the game and kick your butt?
Yeah, pretty much. They can, put the settings down to amateur and just start, headbutting me to death, turn fouls off, and just give me a whooping. So
before we dive into it, Ryan, just kind of give people the background on who Ryan O'Hara is, where you grew up and how you kind of got into combat sports journalism.
Well, it's interesting. So I grew up in Yuma, Arizona, which is a big combat sports town. Efrain Escudero's from there. He was a UFC fighter. Calvin Gastelum and I, we went to high school together. He's a UFC contender right now. He fought Chris Weidman. He was supposed to fight Anderson Silva at one point, but I know him not too well, but I know him. We ran into each other. The last time I saw him in person was 2015. I was producing a MMA show out in Yuma, so I got to run into a lot of my old high school friends. Got to introduce our producers to an amazing pizza joint, on Fourth Avenue? I don't even remember anymore. Avenue B something. Yeah, I haven't been in Yuma in so long. I'm starting to forget where things are, but that's where I got my start. And I was always interested in being a journalist and being a broadcaster. And Yuma is a great place for that. So that's how it started. And I actually was a pure Oscar De La Hoya fan for the longest time. I didn't become a hardcore boxing fan until 2003, actually. We had a family friend that owned a Chinese restaurant called Bamboo Garden, which no longer exists. And they invited me over to their house to watch Vitaly Klitschko and Lennox Lewis on pay-per-view. I believe that was a pay-per-view. So I got to have homemade orange chicken and all that. Still the best Chinese food I've ever had in my life. They made the best food. So I was there chilling on the couch, playing with their parakeets and watching boxing. And I had never seen these guys before. But I'm trying to think. did Lennox fight Klitschko after Tyson? Yeah, I think he did.
It was his
That
last
might have
fight.
been after the
He
Tyson.
retired after that fight.
Yeah, he retired after the fight. So, and I watched parts of Lennox Lewis Mike Tyson at an Applebee's, but I wasn't really into it. I mean, I was into Mike Tyson, but I was really more into Oscar De La Hoya than anything else. But it was the Lewis Klitschko fight that really made me a hardcore fan of the sport, and so that's how that started. And I've played hockey my entire life, and after I had an accident that kind of messed up my career, that's when I kind of focused on becoming a boxing journalist. And I put a message on LinkedIn. I was like, hell, why not? I'll just put a message on LinkedIn, and maybe some random dude will see it and offer me, a job or something. And that's actually what happened. Nestor Gibbs from the Boxing Voice discovered me on LinkedIn. So that's how it all started. Just I was just curious. So you can blame Nestor for me being in the sport.
And was that like written pieces, video pieces? Because I know they kind of do both over there.
Yeah, back then they had just started their podcast, so it was pretty well. It was little known at the time. I remember they sent me they sent me some shirts, and I think they sent me like a backdrop to put behind me anytime I appeared on the show, which I didn't appear on the show very often because I was so busy because I was also covering NASCAR at the time. So I didn't make appearances on the show very often. But now, of course, the Boxing Voice is a huge platform. Nestor's the only guy on his show. It looks like I don't think Danny's on it on the show. He's still with the Boxing Voice, but he's no longer on the actual show they do on Instagram, as far as I know. But I'm really proud of Nestor. He's doing a great job, and I'm happy to see him be successful.
Who was your first boxing interview?
My first boxing interview. That's a good question. I honestly don't remember. That's probably not a good thing, but that's funny. Let's see. I will say my first big in-person interview is actually. It's funny you mentioned that. I actually told him this last night. It was Danny Jacobs. It was Danny Jacobs and Deontay Wilder. It was during the Broner Porter weekend out in Las Vegas, and I remember. I literally told Jacobs the story because it made me laugh, and he laughed. He laughed pretty hard too. But when I first met Danny, he was actually yelling at Nestor. He wasn't happy with some comments that he made on a radio show. And Danny Jacobs is a really smart dude. He listens to all the shows, and he heard something that he didn't like, and he just went off on Nestor at the table. And then Nestor left, and I was like, "Hey, hey, Danny, I'm Ryan O'Hara. It's nice to meet you. I work for that guy." And he just gave me a look, and I was like, I'm not here to upset you. I wanted to ask him questions. So he kind of looked at me like, oh, geez, I hope he's not like this guy. But we ended up talking about, his upcoming fight with Peter Quillen. And I asked him about Golovkin, and he told me, hey, I want to fight Triple G, but I want to fight Peter Quillen first, which is what he did. So he knocked out Peter Quillen in the first round, and then eventually he fought Triple G 2 years later. I think it was May of 2017 is when they fought. And that was a pretty close fight. And of course, right after the Jacobs fight, that's when Triple G and Canelo finally got it on in a very controversial outcome, unfortunately. But that's boxing for you.
Best fight you've been ringside for?
Best fight I've been ringside for. Whew, let's see. I've been to. I gotta say, probably the second fight between Canelo and Golovkin. That was one of the best chess matches I've ever seen personally. Even though it was a one-sided mismatch, like the first couple of rounds of the Spence Crawford fight was beautiful. You saw everything play out. Two excellent technicians in the ring, and of course Crawford ended up being victorious. But I would say that was probably the most like exciting and also one-sided fights I've been a part of was Spence and Crawford. And unfortunately, we waited 7 years for that, but at least we finally got to see the fight.
That's true. Well, let's dive into this fight this weekend. I know that you were actually ringside for it. So, fight reviews Saturday, the 14th of September from the T-Mobile Arena, Las Vegas on Amazon pay-per-view. Saul Canelo Alvarez, 62-2-2. Unanimous decision, 12 over Edgar Berlanga, who dropped to 22-1. So before we dive into the fight, I know that you were ringside, Ryan, for this, working the event. How was fight week? How was Vegas? Did it compare to some of the other big Canelo fights that you've worked?
Yeah, in fact, I felt there was more energy for this one than previous Canelo fights. And there's always a big crowd for Canelo fights, but for the Berlanga fight, it seemed like there was a little extra oomph, and we felt that ringside, and then we got the email, hey, this fight's a sellout. The Munguia fight wasn't a sellout. I felt there was a certain like vibration that you felt. It was more thunderous than previous Canelo fights. And I think you have to give, not only it's Mexican Independence Day weekend, obviously, it was Mexican Independence Day weekend, so that obviously played a factor. But also, I think we should give credit to Edgar Berlanga for selling the fight.
Mm.
If Jaime Munguia, acted out of line, and no, this is not him. So I understand, some guys just don't want to act outside of their normal personality to sell a fight. Errol Spence and Terrence Crawford, they didn't do it. And, the fight still sold pretty well. But Berlanga, of course, said, I'm going to knock out Canelo I think he said the 6th round. Talked a lot of trash. Canelo talked trash back. I think that sold the fight. I think if Berlanga, just sat there and said, oh, yeah, I respect Canelo, this is going to be a good fight, a lot of people probably would have been like, this doesn't really, this really isn't, itching my fancy or anything. So I felt that alone helped sell the fight. And crazily enough, you had UFC 306, I think, or Noche or Noche. I'm not even sure how they are pronouncing it, but despite the fact that you had another major event literally across the street, Canelo still sold the place out. So, what's that tell you? Canelo is still the face of boxing. It was a great event. I enjoyed it.
So you think boxing managed to keep hold of the September Independence Day? Because I know obviously going into this, it was a lot of people were making out like, not only is it Canelo kind of against the UFC, but it was like boxing. Are they going to be able to keep hold of this huge boxing date that's been around for, many years? Yeah.
So the way I look at it, Canelo obviously still owns the weekend, but I'm not going to be biased. I was told at the Mixer on Friday, I'm actually probably the most unbiased reporter there is in boxing. So I'm going to try to live up to that as best as I can. Yeah. So how I want to attack this is, obviously Canelo is still the face of boxing. He owns Mexican Independence Day weekend. But does boxing necessarily own the date? Not necessarily. The way I look at it, Canelo owns the weekend, but Canelo's not going to fight forever. You're going to have someone, behind him take that date. Who could potentially take over for Canelo? Honestly, I can't think of anyone right now. Jesse Bam Rodriguez. That's one, but does he have the pull of a Canelo Alvarez? I don't think so. At least not yet. He could. He's an amazing fighter. One of the top pound for pound fighters in the world. I think that's a question that a lot of people should be asking. Like, we should be looking a couple years down the road. Canelo's not going to be here forever. I think he said several years ago that he wanted to retire when he was 37 years old. He's 34 now. So that's 3 years from now. 3 years from now is 2027. We could see Canelo fight for the last time. So boxing needs to think, how can we build the next set of superstars? And I think Turki Al-Sheikh has a good way of going about it. Pay-per-views generally are too expensive. Now, if you're a Canelo Alvarez, $90 is completely fine. And the number that came out was $650,000. That's honestly a good number in this economy. Mm-hmm. It's a great number in this economy. Sold out the fight, despite the economy being the way it is. So obviously it doesn't affect Canelo. But if you're trying to build a person into a superstar, I think that's the challenge that we have right now. Terrence Crawford, one of the greatest fighters of this era. Arguably he's right there with Floyd Mayweather, but he doesn't have that pay-per-view attraction. I forget the number that came out off the top of my head. What was it? 85,000 buys for the fight with Madrimov. Not good.
Yeah, something around there, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think if I have my numbers right, because I wrote an article on it, I think since 1960 or something, there have only been 4 pay-per-views that have amassed less than 100,000 buys, roughly. And I think Crawford like accounts for half of those pay-per-views. One of them being the fight with Victor Postol that did 55,000 buys, and this one. And I think his fights with Amir Khan and Sean Porter did above 150,000, which is better, but that's still not good. It's something to think about. So yeah, boxing is getting better, I would say. I mean, it's still not in a place where I would say it's in an amazing spot, but reducing the price of pay-per-views is a good start. Having the best fight, more consistently, it's happening more, which I appreciate, which I can appreciate. So yeah. So for the people who are, on the boxing side that are celebrating this, like, aha, take that UFC. Yeah, I mean, celebrate this win. You got Canelo Alvarez. But when Canelo retires, who's going to take over? That's what I'm thinking. I went to school for Intel analysis and stuff. I'm an analytical thinker. I'm like, yeah, it's a good win for now, but we got to think ahead of time. The future. Who's the future of the sport? That's the big question.
I'll fire some names at you, and you tell me what you think about them being able to replace Canelo.
Absolutely.
Ryan Garcia.
Ryan Garcia, maybe, but for the wrong reasons. Not for fighting. As nice of a guy as he is, it's I don't know. I mean, he's so all over the place. I don't even know. I hope he's doing okay. That's all I got to say about him. If he takes boxing seriously, yes. But right now, with him under suspension, that's a big what if for me.
Jaime Munguia.
I think there's a good chance. Maybe not. Maybe not as much as Canelo. I think he's right behind him. I think he has got a good shot. He's a nice, humble young man with a lot of power, and he's a very exciting come forward fighter. I think absolutely he could do it, but with the way he fights, right, and how reckless he can be defensively at times, I think he has a good chance of like holding that spot for a bit. But if he takes too much damage, that obviously would limit his longevity in the long run. So I think he's got a good chance. Mexicans, they love their explosive fighters.
Following in the footsteps of Floyd, how about Gervonta Davis?
Let's see, Gervonta. It depends on who he fights, honestly, because like I love watching Tank, honestly. Like, dude, that dude can fight. I mean, I wouldn't want to get in a fight with him. That power is absolutely destructive. If you look at his previous pay-per-view numbers pre-Ryan Garcia, not the best, right? But as soon as he fought someone that people wanted to see him fight, they wanted to see the Ryan Garcia fight, boom, they did over 1 million pay-per-view buys, and minus all of the misfits and the misfit fights and the Logan Paul KSI fight. That was, in reality, that was the first fight in about 5 years to do over 1 million pay-per-view buys. So it really goes to show you, what can be accomplished if you just put fights together that the fans want. So I'll give Tank credit for trying to make the Loma fight, even though it didn't come to fruition. I hope they fight maybe next year. I don't really blame Loma for quote unquote ducking. I don't really think it's ducking per se, because Loma wanted the Tank fight in 2017, 2018, 2019, and I don't blame Tank for the fight not happening. I think it's obvious who was holding the fight, who was preventing the fight from happening, because a certain someone said, hey, we want to make fights in-house. Well, Loma wasn't in-house. He was a top-ranked guy. Tank was with PBC. So that was the issue. And as soon as Tank left that umbrella, he tried to make the fight the fans wanted, and Loma's team wasn't interested. So we'll see how that goes. I think Tank has a chance of taking that spot back, but he needs to be more active. Fight better fighters and stay out of trouble. I think that would be ideal.
And lastly, someone I thought was going to be, but he was on that trajectory until he imploded. How about someone like a Teofimo Lopez?
Teofimo, I think he has a chance. In fact, I actually ran into him after the Canelo fight this weekend. It's funny how that happened. A friend of mine who was just getting into boxing, she texted me and said, "Hey, send me a few pictures of Vegas." I'm like, all right. I was just on my phone. I turned a corner I was at the Wolfgang Puck restaurant, and I just took a picture of the restaurant. I looked down, and Tio's giving me a weird look. I'm like, oh, bleep-a-doo, it's freaking Teofimo Lopez. And so, hey, Tio, how's it going, man? I'm like, I wasn't trying to take a picture of you, I swear. I told him the story. I showed him the text. I was like, look, she said to take a random picture of Vegas, and you just happened to be here. I'm like, that's what's going on, man. So we talked about the altercation that he had with Crawford. He said to me, that Crawford put his finger in his face. And that's how it all started. And Crawford said, hey, we can fight here right now if you want. And Tio responded with, I'll fight you in the ring. I'm not going to fight you here. So Tio told me that he's willing to go up and wait to fight him. 154. He said 154, maybe 147, because obviously a 2-weight jump would be kind of big for Tio. But yeah, you know what? Teofimo Lopez is a really talented fighter. I think he's got a chance if he stay active. His last couple of performances haven't been as aesthetically pleasing as some would want. But the good news is that he's been staying busy, albeit against lesser competition. But yeah, I think Tio has a chance to take that spot. As long as he stays consistent. But we'll see. Honestly, I don't think the fighters that we have right now, I don't see them ever getting as popular as Canelo. Canelo has set such a high bar, right? I think it's going to be really hard to touch that bar. So it's like someone can take the spot, but are they going to have the glamour and prestige of Canelo? I don't think so. I think Canelo was a unique case in my opinion, because he's I'm obviously I'm a dude, so I'm not trying to say the guy's beautiful, but most people are like, wow, Canelo's a really attractive dude. The dude can really fight, and he's really personable. And I don't know if a lot of these guys are really personable in the way Canelo is. And now that Canelo's, speaking English, that makes it even better, for the fans that, don't speak Spanish.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's true. But Brian, turning our attentions back to the fight, what was your review of Canelo v. Edgar Berlanga?
It played out exactly as I expected. I wrote in my prediction that Berlanga was going to put up a better fight than people thought. He wasn't going to get knocked out early. Maybe he gets knocked down, in the early rounds, but I expected him to put up a good fight, and he did. Obviously, Canelo, I didn't score the fight, but 9 rounds to 3 sounded about right. 10 rounds to 2 was probably good too. But when people ask me who performs better, Munguia or Berlanga, I know I'm probably going to catch a lot of heat for this, but I'd say Berlanga for the reason everyone expected Munguia to lose to Canelo, right? And even when we were talking about how Canelo would beat Munguia, it was like, yeah, Munguia is going to throw a crazy amount of punches. He's probably going to get knocked down in the early rounds. I wrote that he was going to get dropped early. I was wrong. I think I predicted that he was going to get stopped late, but that was wrong. But it played out exactly how I thought. Munguia was going to put up a good fight, but Canelo was just going to be too good. In my case with Berlanga, everyone expected for him to get destroyed in the first couple of rounds, and he went the distance. So so the way I look at it, Munguia did exactly as people expect. Man, I'm struggling today. Munguia performed in the way most people expected for him to perform, and Berlanga overachieved. And so for that, I'll give Berlanga a lot of props because the whole world was saying he was going to get destroyed. And in parts of the fight, even though it was hard to catch because Canelo's work was, better than his, he was actually backing Canelo up at times with his jab. A lot of people didn't see that happening either. If you have Clarissa Shields complimenting you at the end of the fight, you did something right. I don't see Clarissa Shields complimenting many people on Twitter for the most part, but at the end of the fight, she was like, "Wow, this guy's got heart," and surprisingly he has a jab, and going off this performance from Berlanga, it's going to help him. Losing to Canelo Alvarez is probably the best thing that happened to his career. So, and as his manager Keith Connolly said after the fight, we're going to build off of this. We're going to get him some wins. So, quote unquote, easy opponents. So he's going to own his skills, train hard, maybe get a fight in Puerto Rico, fight in front of his hometown. And you know what? Berlanga might become a star. Might. If he keeps up the good work, there's a possibility of him doing that. But we'll see what happens.
I'll be honest. I was one of the people who I thought Canelo was going to slowly work him and then probably knock him out round 7, 8, 9. Mm-hmm. So what had you seen in his previous fights? Because a lot of them were obviously first round knockouts, and then he struggled, in my opinion, against Marcelo. Is it Cocares? Is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah, Cocares. Yeah. He
didn't look great against Damon Nicholson. So what had you seen which gave you the confidence to obviously, it was going to go the distance?
I noticed in his fight with Patrick McCrory, that, he was moving better. He was more fluid. He had more speed. His jab had improved. I mean, not to the point that I'm saying it's the greatest jab in boxing, but good enough that he's going to back up, some solid fighters. Not a great fighter, not an elite fighter, but someone that's an average fighter. So, and that's how I saw it playing out. And of course, when you have Memo Heredia as your strength and conditioning coach, you're going to have a little bit of a boost too.
We'll skip over that. What do you think about Canelo's performance? Because I know, obviously, like we said at the start of the show, you've been at ringside for a lot of his fights. Do you think Father Time's catching up with him? Do you think it's just tactical, the way that his inputs decreased?
Honestly, this version of Canelo is still going to be David Benavidez. I'm going to be honest with you. He's still one of the best fighters in the world. Maybe he's slowed down a little bit, but it's hard to tell. I don't think he's lost his quote unquote killer instinct. He tried to finish Berlanga, and I think Berlanga was tougher than he thought too. So that played a part of it, and I think a lot, and these super middleweights now, they're bigger. I mean, they're just bigger in general. I think Berlanga, the report said he was 193 pounds. I think he actually was like 185. So he rehydrated about 17 pounds, not the 25 that was reported. So I think like the fighters at 168 now are just bigger, right? And so, the higher you move up in weight, the harder it is naturally to knock someone out. Now, I know some people were like, well, he knocked out Billy Joe Saunders and he knocked out Caleb Plant and he knocked out Yildirim. But, Yildirim was an unheralded fighter. Billy Joe arguably was not the same Billy Joe that was a middleweight champion. Ever since he tested positive for, I forget oxylofrin. Ever since Billy Joe Saunders tested positive for oxylofrin, he was not the same fighter. And I think a lot of people would agree with that. Because when I watched Billy Joe against David Lemieux, man, he was boxing incredible. He had incredible speed. He was in and out. He was fast. I mean, that version of Billy Joe looked great. And then he tested positive for oxylofrin, and then he became noticeably slower. So I think that played a factor. It's played a factor in Canelo's lack of knockouts since 2021. And you also got to add in the fact that Canelo's been in 66 fights. That's a lot of training camps. He's 34 now. 34 with that amount of fights, that can, that can make a difference. But it's not like Canelo has been in any close encounters lately. So he clearly beat Berlanga. He clearly beat Munguia. I thought some people had that fight close. I actually had Canelo winning that fight 9-3, 117-111. Because Munguia was throwing a lot of punches, but he wasn't exactly accurate either. At least that's just how I looked at it. That's my perspective. But it's not like Canelo has been in any danger. He wasn't in. I mean, other than the Bivol fight, obviously, which he lost. I had that fight 9-3 for Bivol. Bivol being the elite WBA light heavyweight champ. I still see Canelo beating David Benavidez. This version of Canelo is still elite. But I think he's got a few more years left in him at least until he decides to retire. And I think he's going to retire on his own terms. And maybe after he beats Benavidez, if they ever fight, I think that maybe that will be his last fight, or maybe he's going to move because he's talked about moving up to 175 to fight Bivol again. Now, if Beterbiev beats Bivol, will Canelo move up to 175? I don't know. He kind of ignored the question from Brendan Taylor after the Berlanga fight, but maybe he didn't hear him right because it was kind of loud in there. But we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Plot Canelo's next 3 fights for us.
Let's see. Well, I want to lead off with this real quick because obviously he's no longer the IBF champ because the IBF's going to IBF. I might go off on a tangent a little bit here, but the IBF puts together some of the worst mandatory fights in history. This is what the IBF does. If you remember, Tyson Fury was the champ. He beat Klitschko, and then he decided he wanted the rematch with Klitschko. And the IBF was like, you have to fight Vyacheslav Glazkov. Fury wanted to fight Klitschko, so the IBF stripped him. Glazkov ended up fighting Charles Martin in a vacant title fight, tore his ACL in the second round, and that was the end of his career. And that's how Charles Martin ended up the champ, and how Anthony Joshua, started his reign by knocking out Martin. So with the IBF here, they tried to mandate that Canelo fight this William Skull guy who I've never heard of until a few months ago. Who is this William Skull? If you look at his resume, the opponents that he fights, I mean, these guys have horrible records. How in the world do these guys even rise in the rankings? Now, Vladimir Shishkin, he has skill. I'll admit it. As a Kronk fighter, he's got skill, but his resume is not the greatest. He shouldn't even be close to having a mandatory shot with Canelo Alvarez. But that's the IBF for you. So we'll have these 2 fighters that, are basically undeserving of the title shot. I think Shishkin is going to beat William Skull. I think he's going to do it rather easily, honestly. And then I think we will see David Benavidez possibly go down from 175 back to 168 and beat Shishkin. Then you have Benavidez with the IBF super middleweight title. Canelo, in my opinion, maybe will fight Christian Mbili. We'll beat him. And then I think we could get Canelo Benavidez in September of 2025. I think that's ideally what's going to happen. So I could be wrong. Maybe Benavidez is like, I don't want to chase him anymore. But let's say he beats Shishkin. If that plays out the way I think it's going to play out, then Benavidez gets a belt. Now he has a belt. Hey, do you want undisputed again? I'm back. And maybe we get that fight September 2025. And honestly, I still think Canelo will win at this point. I haven't seen. I mean, obviously, David's an incredible fighter, incredible speed, but it's not just about speed and it's not just about power. It's also about movement. And I think that, Benavidez is a little bit flat-footed at times. And, Canelo being as fluid as he is, I think that's going to give Benavidez a lot of problems. But to David's credit, he's been working on that in the gym with Guillermo Rigondeaux, trying to work on cutting the ring off. Now, I don't know if that's going to be enough, It just depends on how he implements the lessons he's learned. Because, just because you work with a guy who's an elite mover won't make you an elite mover. For instance, Caleb Plant. I mean, I will say this, but with Plant, amazing comeback against Trevor McCumbee. And I predicted that would be the fight of the night, and it was. That was an incredible fight. For people who knew McCumbee before he had the long layoff. But yeah, Caleb Plant worked with Andre Ward before fighting Canelo. And some people were like, oh yeah, he's going to beat Canelo now. I'm like, wait, just because he's working with Andre Ward doesn't mean he's going to become Andre Ward. And Canelo still won the fight. So I still think Canelo is gonna beat Benavidez, unless if they fight in 2020. I don't think they're gonna wait that long to make the fight. But it's gonna be a fight in 2025 in September on a Mexican Independence Day weekend. Now you guys can all make fun of me if I'm wrong, but I'll stick with that prediction.
Would that get close to 1 million pay-per-view buys?
I would say so. I mean, that's going to be a great promotion. I think it'll definitely get at least 1.1 million buys. If it's priced reasonably well, if they do, the Turki Al Sheikh model of making it more affordable, we will see if they can make that happen. Because obviously Turki and Canelo are kind of butting heads right now, which I honestly expected for them to butt heads. Because if you look at Turki's way of doing things, right? He's trying to help fighters who need that extra boost. Canelo doesn't need that extra boost because he's Canelo. He's already at the pinnacle. So he doesn't really need Turki. The only thing that Turki can do for Canelo is give him even more money, which is what Canelo has asked for. Give me even more money. And I think they could probably work something out. I think they could. I think Turki's probably got to calm down a little bit and realize who he's working with. And Canelo maybe could see that, Turki's just trying to do the best for boxing, and maybe they can meet on that common ground. That would be cool.
Do you see the Crawford-Canelo fight coming to fruition then, or not?
I don't think so. I think it's just too big of a jump, in my opinion, for Crawford. Obviously, the highest he's fought is 154. That's still 2 weight classes. That's, whew. I don't know Crawford's walking around weight, but I know it's not, in the 180 range like Canelo. And when, Canelo did an interview recently and he said, oh yeah, I'll take the fight with Crawford if they offer me a good amount of money. And they asked him about Crawford after the fight, and he responded with no comment. He didn't want to talk about it. I don't blame him. But the interesting thing with Crawford is that every time he has moved up in weight, he's literally fought a champion right off the bat. So obviously he won his first title against Ricky Burns in 2014 in Scotland. And then the next weight class at 140, he fought Thomas Delorme off the bat, knocked him out, moved up to 147, fought Jeff Horn off the bat, waited forever to fight Errol Spence. And then he fought Madrimov, however you say it, off the bat at 154. And so his first fight at 168, he wants it to be Canelo, but I just don't think that's going to happen. I just don't, Canelo doesn't want, the critics to come after him, because if he loses to Crawford, it's gonna ruin his legacy. You just lost to a tiny fighter, quote unquote, the guy who's like 2 weight classes smaller than you. That would be a stain on his legacy. Like casual fans would crap on Canelo if he lost to Crawford. Now, for hardcore fans, we go, well, it's understandable because Crawford's Crawford, right? Crawford is one of the best fighters in the world. But if you're Canelo, do you want to go out with that when you're close to retirement? That would be horrible. So I think that's on his mind, right? And if he destroys Crawford, well, that doesn't help him either. People will say, oh, well, he beat a small guy. So I just don't think I just don't think Canelo wants the drama. He's better off just not fighting him and fighting Benavidez and maybe getting a rematch with Bivol. At least that people can say, Canelo's moving up in weight. He's daring to be great again, even though he's already like a bona fide first ballot Hall of Famer. But if he goes down the Crawford route and it backfires, whew, that's not good.
Do you think Canelo is underrated?
Is Canelo underrated? I don't think he's underrated, and I don't think he's overrated either. He is who he is. I think that's how I look at it. He's a great fighter. He's one of the best of our generation. I don't think he's overrated, but not underrated. But like but like any other fighter, I mean, he struggles against guys with elite jabs. But most guys struggle against fighters who have elite jabs, right? Mayweather struggled against. He had some trouble with Emmanuel Augustus, right? As unorthodox as he was, he struggled for a short time against Shade Mosley. Mosley I think he was like the first guy to hurt Mayweather in a fight. And in the first fight with Marcos Maidana, he had real trouble in that fight. Well, Maidana was smothering him on the inside and was, landing an assortment of fouls and, knees to the groin. I mean, Maidana was doing a lot of dirty work on the inside, which wasn't being caught by Tony Weeks, the referee, for that fight. I think Kenny Bayless was the ref for the rematch. So, I mean, I don't think Canelo is underrated. I think he is who he is.
Also on that card, Erisandi Lara moved to 31-3-3 after Danny Garcia retired in the 9th, who dropped to 37-4. Garcia went down in round 9 for the first time in his career. So, Ryan, what was your assessment of this fight?
I will say that was horrible. I mean, that fight almost put me to sleep. I'm just gonna be honest with you. That was not a good fight. I didn't expect it to be a good fight, though. Man, I hate to say a fight was bad, but it was a chess match, but it wasn't an exciting chess. You have chess matches that are exciting. Canelo and Triple G, the second fight. Can you hear me, by the way?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, I'm just making sure. I had to reset something here. But this was a chess match that was just slow. Lara wasn't really pressing as much as I wanted him to press. He was hurting Garcia with almost every right hand that he landed. I don't know if people saw that, but obviously, Danny moving up in weight. He was at his best at 140 when he was beating guys like Lucas Matisse and Amir Khan. And then 147, he had some success. He fought Robert Guerrero. He didn't look great in the fight, but he won the fight. I thought he did enough to beat Sean Porter, but he lost that fight in a close decision. And then he moved, and then after a mixed bag of results at 147, he moved to 154, fought Jose Benavidez Jr. And he wasn't like that impressive at 154. And this fight was I think it was a catch weight at 160 for Lara's middleweight title. It was just too big of a jump, and Garcia just wasn't himself. And on top of that, he hasn't really been taking boxing seriously the last few years. He's more of a real estate guru now, and that's okay. I'm not faulting his hustle. He's got a good real estate business going, and he's made a lot of money for himself, and he's a really smart guy. But when you take your mind off of boxing, it calls your bluff. And I think that's what happened. That's what happened on Saturday. I wouldn't say that he quit. I would say that was more of an accumulation of damage that he had taken throughout the fight. Because Lara is not a volume guy, right? He throws a couple punches, he throws great counters, and they catch you, boom. And I think just over the course of the fight, he had taken so many of those combinations, and then finally Lara landed one big left hand, and Garcia didn't see it coming, and he just went down on a knee, went back to his corner, and was like, "Yep, this is it." So unfortunate, because he's had a good career. He's a great family man. And, I wish him the best in retirement. And I think, he's going to be a great trainer and a great promoter.
Moving on to probably the best fight of the entire card, like you said. Caleb Plant, 23-2 with a TKO 9 over Trevor McCumbee, who dropped to 28-1. Plant was also down in round 4. So, what did you think of this fight? Like you said, you guessed beforehand it was going to be the fight of the night.
I predicted this fight wrong. I actually predicted that Trevor McCombie was going to win a split decision, but it wasn't a bad pick considering, McCombie's background. And, a lot of people weren't McCombie going into this fight because he had been inactive for a while. So in 2017, he initially scored a first-round knockout of Donovan George in Las Vegas. He tested positive for some performance-enhancing substances. And then he admitted to the investigators, he was like, well, yeah, I took an IV after the weigh-in, which is not allowed, right? And that IV that he had taken had performance-enhancing substances in it. Now, take it with a few grains of salt, but he came forward and said, this is what happened, right? So maybe that's how I got the substance. Sorry, someone's calling me.
Oh, no, good. You're back.
Okay. I'll have to call this person back. But yeah, so that's what happened. So he ended up getting suspended. He considered retirement, came back and scored a couple of wins in 2018. And, I talked to him a few years ago and he was going through some personal issues. So he was trying to focus on that, trying to get over that. Then COVID hit. And so when COVID hit, obviously it was hard for him to get a fight. And then he decided, okay, I'm ready to box again. And then he tore his ACL and had to take even a longer layoff. So that's why we didn't see McCombie from, 2018 to 2023, roughly. It was this combination of everything. But what people don't know is that I think he had an amateur record of like 128-11, had like 7 national championships. So he had all this skill and, just didn't have, a lot of, pro experience, so to speak. So for him to take this fight was actually surprising, in a sense. So I was not surprised at the success he had in the early rounds. He managed to rock Caleb Plant with a left hook and ended up dropping him. I think that left hook just caught, Plant by surprise. I don't think he was hurt by the punch. But yeah, and then Plant turned the fight around, decided, hey, I want to see if this guy can, get extension of his punches on the inside. And it turns out, well, McCombie doesn't have a lot of experience fighting on the inside. That's something he's got to work on. But Plant ended up getting the win, proved a lot of guys wrong. Plant was criticized for quote unquote not being able to fight on the inside, and he proved to everyone that he can fight on the inside. It was one hell of a comeback from Caleb Plant.
You know what Plant's recent performances remind me of? Michael Chandler joining the UFC, where he realized if I just have fight of the night fights all the time, win or lose, people still want to see me fight. Because before, when he used to fight people like, like Porky Medina and stuff like that, people were just saying like Plant is so boring to watch.
Mm-hmm. Well, look, he was exciting to me. I mean, when he turned the fight around, I was on the edge of my seat. Like, wow, Caleb's an improved fighter, and coming off another long layoff like that, that's really impressive. And you know what? Layoffs haven't really seemed to affect Plant, it seems. Because he had shoulder surgery leading up to the Uzkatagi fight. He was out for a year. He came back and won the title. So, and people criticized him because, oh, he got cut. Well, he got cut from a headbutt in that fight. But, if it wasn't for the cut, if it wasn't for the headbutt, it wouldn't have been as close, so to speak. But, before the cut, Plant that dropped him twice and was just thoroughly dominating him until he got busted open by the headbutt.
Yeah, it's good. I don't know who do you think will see Caleb Plant in with next?
Oh, let's see. That's a good question. I did say Canelo was going to fight Billy, but maybe he gives Plant a rematch. I mean, I'd be fine with it based on how he performed in this fight. I think that would be good. I still think Canelo would win, but I think the fight would be closer than the first fight. I think that's also a possibility. And if Canelo decides to move up to fight Bivol, I think that would open the door for Canelo to get Billy, and maybe he fights Demetrius Andrade. Yeah, that's another one. Because Demetrius was supposed to fight David Morrell at one point, but for some reason that fight didn't go through. But yeah, I think we'll see that fight. There's a possibility that we will see Canelo give Plan a rematch. You know what? Like, I'm just excited that that we're having this discussion about potential fights, because it's not just one or the other. There's a whole basket that could take place, and I'm typically not I'm not very good at making those predictions, because I thought Jake Paul was going to fight some random professional boxer, get another fight under his belt, but it ended up being Mike Tyson that he decided like a few days after I made a story, thinking like, hey, I think this is going to be Jake Paul's like future schedule, and that wasn't even close.
Also on that card, Las Vegas native Rolando Rolly Romero, unanimous decision 10 over Manuel Jaimez. What did you think of Rolly's performance? Not as explosive, not as dynamic as his usual ones.
It wasn't a great performance. I didn't think either of them looked particularly good, to be honest with you. I think Jaimez the silver lining for Jaimez is that he didn't get knocked out, so that's a good thing. For Romero, I guess it's a W, so to speak. Coming off of a one-sided loss to Pitbull Cruz, so maybe that will give Romero the confidence that he needs. So having a win like that, it would have been nice if he had knocked him out, but having the win helps a lot too. So I don't know what's next for Romero. I don't consider him to be anywhere close to being elite or a champion. The whole fight with Barroso, that was one of the worst stoppages I've ever seen. That basically gave him the belt, and that put him in the situation that he's in. So, and Barroso just got knocked out himself, unfortunately, in his case. But maybe Romero fights Barroso again, because that's a big like asterisk on his resume, right? Well, if they rematch and Romero can have a conclusive victory, and he just got knocked out, why not make that fight? I think it's still a good fight either way, even though Barroso just took a loss.
Lastly on this card, Stephen Fulton, 22-1 with a split decision over Carlos Castro. How did you see this one, Ryan? Because on the TV, I thought it was pretty close, and I wouldn't have been surprised if Castro got it.
I wouldn't have argued if Castro got it. I had Fulton winning barely. I think that like the last round really like helped him. That one, he had a good round, and a good 10th round that in my eyes gave him the win. But obviously, Mexican Independence Day weekend, all the Mexicans were probably cheering for Castro. I can't imagine any of them were cheering for Fulton, right? And Fulton got dropped. He got outboxed in some of the rounds, and then other rounds he clearly outboxed Castro. And I think I was okay with the decision, but man, that was like one of the. I mean, just being there ringside, it hurt. Like my ears hurt hearing those boos, man. I mean, it vibrated. It vibrated us like, oh man, they were really upset about it. But I personally didn't have an issue with the scorecards, but obviously the fans did. But I'll give Fulton a lot of credit for getting up off the canvas, because he didn't look great, honestly. But he was coming off a knockout loss. And Castro's, had a couple of losses himself, including a knockout loss to Luis Neri. So both these guys have been damaged in the past. So I think it was an okay performance. It wasn't great, but he got the win, and that hopefully that will help him in the future. What was also interesting is Fulton sported a new tattoo called "Can't Be Stopped." I said in my head I was going to tweet something because I'm a jokester, and I was like, "Well, you can't be stopped, but you can be dropped." And I was like, "Okay, I need to cut off the cheese here. Don't be cheesy. Yeah, I don't need anyone upset at me today." But that's what I was thinking. He can be dropped, but good win for Stevens. I'm happy to see that he's got good things going for him. I think he still has a future in boxing, and for him to get a win, especially after the way he was beat by Inoue. It says a lot about his fortitude, his mental fortitude, at least.
What did you think?
Because this isn't the first time he's been on the receiving end of boos either. The whole fight with Brandon Figueroa, that wasn't a popular decision either.
What did you think about him being dropped all the way down to the early prelims?
I wasn't okay with that. I thought that fight should have been televised, and it was good enough for it to be televised. And also, I said this to myself. I said this to a couple of other reporters because of the fight. I was like, I said, don't be surprised if Castro wins this because he was dropped to the untelevised prelims, and he's made comments, criticizing his promoter basically. I wouldn't say dissing, but he's been critical of PBC, not scheduling him as much, keeping him quote unquote on the shelf. So I was like, man, maybe there's going to be a bad decision here, but he got the win. But I think maybe that was punishment for some of the things he said about PBC. That wouldn't shock me. I don't know if that's true or not, but it's interesting because he's been one of their stars.
All right, so rolling it forward to this weekend's fight previews. Saturday, the 21st of September, Wembley Stadium, London on DAZN pay-per-view. Daniel Dubois, 21-2, up against Anthony Joshua, who's 28-3 for the IBF heavyweight title of the world. So, Ryan, just give us your quick preview of this.
I think it's going to be a good fight. AJ, under the tutelage of Ben Davison, he's become a more economical, composed, and explosive boxer puncher. And we saw that against Otto Wallin. We did see that against Ngannou, sort of, just because he didn't play with his food. As soon as he got an opportunity to send Ngannou to the shadow realm, he did it. So we got that. So I think the killer AJ is back. I thought for the longest time, he was declining, and maybe he was, but I guess he just needed a fresh face, a fresh voice in his corner. And Ben's a great trainer. One of the best trainers in boxing. I would say he's one of the most underrated trainers in boxing. And Dubois, he's getting better. But I don't think he's improved enough that he's going to beat AJ. AJ's got a great jab. And, Dubois struggles against guys who can jab. Joe Joyce stopped him behind his jab alone. Shut that left eye down and, won the fight. Obviously, Usyk got a win over Dubois too, but every time that Dubois has lost, he's come back and he's had a solid run. But in this fight, I see AJ winning by an 8th round TKO. He's more composed. Dubois sometimes can fight, with his emotions on his sleeve, and that's not always a good thing. Against a guy like AJ, who's so composed and patient, that emotion and could come back to bite Dubois late in the fight, and I think it will. I think AJ is going to win the fight. I wouldn't be surprised if both these guys hit the deck. Dubois is an extremely powerful puncher. I think 20 knockouts out of his 21 or 22 wins. So, I see AJ winning this fight, and it's going to be a good fight, though. And I think Dubois' stock will still go up. He's still going to put up a good fight. It's just, AJ's on another level.
I know, obviously, Dubois has been accused of bottling it, essentially. Do you think he'll be overawed by the occasion? Obviously, I know he's fought in some big fights against Alexander Usyk, but
forgot to mention that
in front of 96,000 fans, probably mostly AJ fans at Wembley Stadium, it's pretty much the biggest of AJ and Canelo are the biggest events. So, do you think that will get to someone like Dubois?
I think so. I think it could. Especially if he starts getting tagged early and he gets frustrated, and then you hear that roar, right? You realize, man, I'm getting outboxed, and all these fans are against me. I think that could be a negative, have a negative impact on Dubois', I'd say mental state. I know that sounds kind of rough, but maybe his mental state, if you look back, if you remember the time that Carl Froch fought Lucien Boutte, and Boutte admitted later on, as soon as I stepped into the ring, my nerves were out of this world. He was not ready for the animosity and just the crowd. He went from fighting on small stages in Montreal. Next thing you know, he's fighting before not 80, 90, 100,000 people. He just wasn't ready for it. Some guys are ready for the moment. Some guys are built, for that environment, and some aren't. And, I don't know if Dubois is, but looking at that, what would you call it? It's kind of like what HBO used to do, Face Off with Max Kellerman. They had that little, pre-fight hype meeting, and you saw AJ, just so chill, so calm. And Dubois was like ready to fight right there. And AJ's like, calm down, young man, calm down. I think that's what it's going to come down to. It's going to come down to that experience versus youth. And sometimes youth can beat experience. Sometimes youth can beat the older fighter. But I think that experience, especially on this stage, is going to help AJ. And I think Dubois is probably going to get a little bit too reckless. And AJ is going to is going to be able to get the stoppage that way.
What do you think of people's take on it's going to be AJ early or Dubois late? Because we have seen in previous fights what AJ has cardiovascular problems, it seems.
Yeah, I mean, the fight can play out in a variety of different ways. I don't think there's like a wrong prediction, so to speak, because anything can happen. Example, when Erickson Lubin fought Jermell Charlo, people thought Lubin was going to give Charlo a great fight. I had people telling me, oh yeah, Lubin's going to win a late stoppage. Lubin's going to win a decision. Charlo's going to win a close fight. Charlo knocked him out in the first round. So you never know what's going to happen. But I don't see Dubois ending it late. It's just, AJ's not a Jerome Miller, so to speak. I don't see it playing out that way. I can see Dubois knocking out AJ early if he makes enough mistakes, because obviously AJ's been cracked before. He got dropped by Vladimir Klitschko in 2017, but he rose up from the deck to stop Klitschko. But in 2019, obviously, when he fought Andy Ruiz in their first fight, he was dropped 4 times. And the first time he was dropped, I think it was in the 3rd round, he got dropped after dropping Ruiz. Mm-hmm. Josh was typically a good finisher, and, he got caught. He got caught with a shot. And, I would say a fighter like Dubois is more powerful and more destructive than a Ruiz. So there's a possibility. I don't see Dubois winning the fight, but if he scored an early knockout of AJ, heavyweight boxing is literally the theater of the unexpected. So I can see that happening, but my prediction will still be an 8th round TKO for AJ. But hey, may the best man win. This fight is actually like the we lost to Alexander Usyk sweepstakes, because the IBF stripped Usyk, basically forced him to vacate the belt. But yeah, maybe the winner of this fight will get a rematch. Well, it would be a 3rd fight for AJ with Usyk, but for Dubois, it would be a rematch, which some people believe is warranted based on the quote-unquote controversial first fight, which, in my opinion, wasn't very controversial.
I know Ben Davidson, you said you like him as a trainer. He's very underrated. I know in the UK, He's very... some people love him, some people hate him because he kind of jumped onto the scene with, Tyson Fury and Billy Joe, and people don't think that he really earned his stripes. What is it you like about Ben Davidson?
I think he's a no-nonsense trainer. And, he hears the noise and he ignores it and just focuses on his fighter. And a lot of other trainers that I've seen in the past, they get it. They take their focus off their fighter and they start joining the circus. Then they take part in the circus when you should be focusing on preparing your fighter for the fight. And I think Davidson is really good at that. And, he's also really respectful as well. So if anyone, comes with an opposing viewpoint, he comes at it from a neutral perspective. And I really appreciate that, because some people don't. Another trainer that does that very well is Eddie Reynoso. He responded to my comments, actually. I said something like, I haven't seen any improvement from Oscar Valdez in his fights with Eddie Reynoso to this point. He responded in English to my tweet and said, well, he mentioned like my sports background, being a hockey player. And he said, well, like when you were a kid, like when you started, you weren't always the same player, right? You got better. Well, I've only had him for a few fights, give me some time and I can show you what I can really do with Oscar Valdez. And I think that may have been before he knocked out Burchell. So he kind of schooled me on that one.
Have you seen any improvements under Ben with AJ?
Oh, 100%. As I said earlier, AJ's more patient, more composed. He's more economical. His punch placement is better. He's not overextending. He's become a better fighter at 34. I was just shocked because, when I saw him fight, what was it? I mean, in the rematch with Usyk, he did better. In the first fight, I saw a decline. He just wasn't the same guy. Obviously, Robert Helenius was. I thought I saw a decline, but really, Helenius was on PEDs. It turns out. But in that fight with Otto Wallin, he was just a completely different guy. And I saw that fight being more competitive than that. He just flat out destroyed Wallin, and most people thought Wallin was going to give AJ a good fight based on his fight with Tyson Fury from several years ago, and that just wasn't the case.
But for those two fights, the Francis Ngannou and the Otto Wallin, I do wonder if we put too much into those, because Joshua did to Ngannou what Tyson Fury should have done. I think he just overlooked him. Whereas the Otto Wallin fight, he knew him from the amateurs and he also had him as a sparring partner. And I think that AJ's problem was he used to overthink things. And because he knew Otto Wallin, I think he didn't overthink because he knew him so well from sparring, so well from the amateur scene. And I think that's why he had such an explosive performance, which, in my opinion, I think we overhype.
Yeah, it's possible. I guess we'll have to see on September 21st if that's the case. But if we see another type of performance like that from AJ, I think we have to give a lot of credit not just to AJ but also Ben Davison. And sometimes it's a chemistry combination. We see it, in sports with guys like Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen. You get two guys together that work really well together. You can really gel and have a good run. Let's see, another good combo. Jaromir Jagr and Mario Lemieux in hockey. That was a great combo. Even though they didn't get along, they played really well together. Jeff Gordon and Ray Evernham in NASCAR. They won. They destroyed NASCAR in the 90s. And, when Gordon and Evernham split, he still won a lot of races, but he didn't have that same rate of success. And obviously, Michael Jordan left the Bulls, went to the Wizards. Scottie Pippen went on to play for other teams, and they didn't see the same success. So, perhaps this is a good chemistry combo. With AJ and Ben Davison. I think that's the case.
But if AJ wins like you predict, do you think we see the Usyk rematch, or do we finally get to see Tyson Fury, AJ?
I think we're going to get the Joshua Fury fight. Finally, we're finally going to get that fight, and we'll see. This is crazy, but heard Deontay Wilder is going to come back. Malik Scott said that in a tweet. In my opinion, I think Wilder needs to maybe go find Mark Breland, give him a call. But so sorry, I really messed up. Can we train together again? Because Wilder without Mark Breland is lost. He's lost. He's not even throwing his right hand the same way anymore. And I think they need to get Wilder a couple of easy wins, maybe get his confidence back. But if he's gonna go back to Malik Scott, I think he should just not. I think he should retire, because that combination has been bad news from the start. But going back to Joshua and Fury, I think Joshua's got him this time. I think Joshua's gonna win that fight this time. Fury's been in I would say 2 wars with Wilder, because the second fight wasn't a war; it was bloody one-sided. And he's got to fight Usyk again. Coming up. So we'll see what happens. But, if Fury beats Usyk, will Joshua fight Fury? It depends. But just because Fury loses to Usyk, that doesn't necessarily mean the fight's not going to happen. Because if you remember, Carlos Baldomir beat Zab Judah for the welterweight title back in, 2006? Floyd Mayweather fought Zab Judah before he fought Baldomir. So after Baldomir beat Judah, Mayweather ended up fighting Zab instead of Baldomir for whatever reason. I think it was probably money related. And then the fight after, that's when he fought Carlos, beat him, and then beat Oscar De La Hoya. Maybe we'll see a repeat of that. Maybe Fury will lose and Joshua will still fight him anyway, because that's still going to be a blockbuster fight. It's still going to be one of the biggest fights in British boxing history, regardless if Fury loses twice to Usyk, which is very possible.
No, 100%. I think because they're both British and the heavyweights, it can happen at any time, and it'll still be huge.
Yeah.
Well, moving on, the next one on that card, we'll quickly just run through these fights. Tyler Denny up against Hamza Shiraz for the EBU European middleweight strap.
I don't know too much about these guys, I'll be honest with you, but I think Shiraz has that fight.
Anthony Kakachi, 22-1 against Josh Warrington, who's 31-3 for the IBO and kind of for the IBF super featherweight title.
I think Warrington. I think Warrington by decision. I think that's a safe play. Warrington's had has had a rough few years. Taking losses to Mauricio Lara, and who did he just lose to recently?
Josh Warrington. Wasn't it Lee Wood?
Yeah, it was Lee Wood. So he's had a tough few fights, but I think this is an opportunity for him to get back in the winner's circle. So I'll take him by decision. I don't think he's the same fighter, but maybe he can prove us wrong.
Another crazy situation by the IBF there, where it was announced for the IBO and IBF super featherweight straps, and then fight week, the IBF decided to turn around and say that it wasn't on the line for Josh Warrington. So, like you were saying earlier, just IBF bin IBF.
Yeah, I mean the IBF's going to do their thing, and the head of the IBF was arrested back in 2000. So I mean, I don't know, man. The IBF's got a weird history, but for some reason it's still considered a legitimate belt. But if you ask me, I don't think we should have any sanctioning bodies. I think it's absolutely asinine that you win a belt, but you have to pay to win the belt. So I mean, that's partially what people criticize Floyd Mayweather Jr. for never becoming undisputed. But literally, if you think about it, Mayweather beat Pacquiao, right? And then after he won, the WBO wanted Mayweather to pay $250,000. Imagine if I was in that position. They're like, if you want to keep this belt, you have to pay us $250,000. I would be like, what? $250,000 to keep this stupid belt? Like, you can take the belt back. I got the WBC. I'll keep one belt. I mean, at least I'll keep one. So, and that's the part of the whole undisputed thing that it's kind of, even though I'm wearing undisputed shirt, one of the problems with the whole undisputed thing is the sanctioning body fees. Yeah, I think that's it takes advantage of the fighter, and then you already have to pay the managerial fee. You're already getting taxed. If you're in America, you're paying 48% in tax, and then you get taxed by the state. You pay more tax at the end of the year, and then the sanction body's like, and we want $250,000, $250,000, or 3% or whatever of the purse. It's crazy, man. That's why it really goes to show you. This is why a lot of fighters, especially those who aren't financially astute or have people on their teams that know what they're doing. This is how a lot of fighters end up broke. You surround yourself with the wrong people, they take advantage of you. And unfortunately, that's happened to a lot of fighters over the years.
Moving on to the news and notes section, only one thing I could really see that was kind of worthwhile talking about this week. Turkey, rumored to be buying The Ring magazine. I know that you've obviously worked for them or still work for them, Ryan, so I don't know if you can comment on that, but any truth to these rumors?
I honestly don't know. I'll be honest. I reached out to Turkey and said, if this is true, congratulations. And if you need another guy on the team, I'm right here. I literally messaged him that. I want to cover more fights. So I'll be honest. I did that. I reached out and I was like, I'm ready to travel the world when you are. I haven't gotten a response, but he's responded to me a few times over different things over the last few months. But if that's true that he's buying The Ring magazine, I'm down to work for them again.
What do you think about that? Because obviously we know right now, obviously Oscar De La Hoya owns it. It's run by Dougie Fisher. I know, but people were kind of concerned because of the amount of money that Turkey has that he would manipulate the rankings essentially.
I mean, it's boxing. It's probably going to happen. I don't know. People with money tend to have a lot of power. And, I'm trying to make more money myself. So if you can't beat them, join them, right?
No, exactly. Well,
hey,
I appreciate you.
I told your viewers, I'm honest, man. Like, I want to make money too.
Well, Ryan, I appreciate
I'm trying to. Yep.
No, sorry.
I'm trying to survive too.
Right? No, exactly.
Yeah.
I appreciate you jumping on. If you want to tell everyone where they can find you and follow you and all the stuff that you've got coming up.
Yeah. So, there's a lot of things coming up. So I'm going to be hosting I'm actually hosting the Anthony Joshua, Danny Dubois PPV feed. So if you watch the fight with me on pbv.com for $19.99, you can join me on the chat feed and we can have a great time. So yeah, if you want to do that, go ahead and join me. I might be going to LA next week. So for those of you who don't know, I actually have an agent with modeling and commercials. So I do that too. So there's a possibility I'll be in LA next week filming something. What else do we got going on? My schedule's pretty packed right now. Colorado Avalanche training camp. I'll be there well, I was supposed to be there tomorrow, but someone just called off of work. So now I can't go. So I'm gonna have someone else go for me, and I'm going to go the following day. Yeah, everything's pretty crazy right now. You can follow me on Instagram at R O'Hara Sports, and on Twitter, now known as X, it is O'Hara Sports. So looking forward to meeting all you guys at the fights. Apparently I'm going to be staying on the Titanic for a lot longer than I expected. So, we'll see you soon, guys. It's nice meeting y'all.
Before you go, Ryan, if you want to just kind of tell our listeners, anyone who's listening, who's, young like yourself, that wants to kind of like follow your steps into journalism, what tips would you give them?
Let's see. Well, when I was a kid, I read articles from, Dan Raphael, Kevin Aioli, a lot of guys, Karen Mulvaney as well. Ariel Helwani, I used to watch all his videos. And I studied their craft. I studied the way they wrote. And then I started trying to implement that in my own stories. I was writing in middle school. I had a fake blog, and I would, write NASCAR articles and baseball, anything I could do. And then I would model my articles, like structure them based on what Aioli and Raphael were doing. So they were actually really instrumental in my career starting. So if you want to get into the business, I'd say start with that early. Find a writer that you really like and try to learn from their style and then implement it in your own writing. And then, be careful what you say on social media too, because I made fun of Dan Raphael when I was in high school. I was probably like 16 or 17. It was right around the time that he fought either Josh Claude or it might have been Margarito, and I was still in high school. And Raphael saw my comment and blocked me, right? And then, of course, in high school, I was not expecting to be a boxing writer. Well, as my writing started to get better, and then I, joined the Ring magazine, I uncomfortably had to ask Raphael. I was like, "Hey, Dan, do you mind unblocking me on Twitter?" And he was like, "What? When did I block you?" I was like 2011. He was like, "Why did I block you?" I was like, "For being a douchebag." And he was like, "Yeah, sounds about right." So yeah, be careful about what you say on social media. Even if you're in high school, you never know if this guy's gonna, end up working with you at some point. And we ended up working a card together some years ago. But yeah, it was an uncomfortable conversation, but it all worked out. We laugh about it to this day, but it probably would have been better if I never got blocked in the first place.
What about with being like a journalist, being able to be honest? Because we know that sometimes you may be honest, a boxer or whoever has a bad performance, and you write that. But then, PBC, Matchroom, or whoever, like we just saw like seconds out, say that they're banned from the Riyadh season events for something that they've written and stuff like that. So what would your advice be to someone who's coming through and, being able to kind of like tread lightly over that?
Man, I would say be your genuine self. Like if you're going to be that hard hitter, from the start, always be the hard hitter. Don't go too far, obviously. But if you're going to be a reporter that's kind of, I hate to say this, but if you're going to be vanilla, right? If you're just going to go with the flow, you should always go with the flow. Just stick to one side, right? But if you're going to be a hard hitter, try your best to be a hard hitter throughout everything. Stay consistent because they're going to see that and they're going to respect that later on. And I kind of learned that from Danny Jacobs talking to him over the weekend because he was laughing about it. He was like, yeah, Nestor Gibbs, he would always say these things and he would really get under my skin. But at the same, he was like, well, you know what? I'm so proud of him for what he's been able to accomplish and that sort of thing. But it was that initial conversation in 2015 that was like, man, you said this about me, like blah, 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 blah. So yeah, you're going to have those conversations, especially if you take that hard hitter route. Yeah, you're going to get phone calls. You're probably going to get text messages asking, what the heck? Like, why'd you say this? I got a call from a really good friend of mine who he was an amateur boxer and he's got really good connections with Kelly Pavlik. He messaged me and said, a certain executive at a certain network is not very happy with you right now and is thinking about banning you from all of their fights. And so I was like, I have a great idea. So I did an investigate. I did a research. I researched all the ratings from like certain television networks. And I wrote this article about how this network is taking over the sport. That's why I wrote it. I'm not mentioning the specific network, but that story I wrote, that was because I got inside scoop that someone was mad. And next thing you know, everything went back to normal. Like, wow, this guy's good after all. But really, I had a little angel on my side telling me I better write this before they kick me out.
Right.
Yeah. But yeah, you know what? Just be yourself. I've always tried to be, I played hockey my entire life. So yeah, I have an abrasive side. Most people don't see it ever, but I try to be as nice and respectful to everyone as I possibly can. And, and you're going to get guys that are going to, trash talk in social media and call you names. I will tell you this, like, of all the years I've been in the sport, of all the people that have called me stupid things, none of them have ever confronted me in person. Not a single one. I mean, I hear things. They're like, hey, this guy doesn't like you. I'm like, okay, whatever. They've never come to my face and said, you know what? I don't like you. That is not, I mean, that might happen to you, but it has not happened to me, which is surprising given how long I've been in the sport.
Ryan, I appreciate you giving us, was it an hour and a half of your night?
Yeah, of course, man.
We are at The Last Round 12 on Instagram and Twitter, and you can join us next time. This is The Last Round.
Thanks for supporting and listening to the show. Follow us at The Last Round 12 on social media. Rate, review, and subscribe. This is The Last Round Podcast.